this situation keeps getting crazier as we have a brand new report from Elliotte Friedman that has dropped, revealing some huge information as it pertains to Brayden Shen getting traded. We're going to break down these reports and discuss what it means going forward, as this has serious implications for not only Brayden Shen, but for Brad Treliving and the Toronto Maple Leafs as he prepares for a big trade. Stay tuned for all that in this episode, folks. Before we get into it, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is a place to be for daily Leafs content. We're getting extremely close to 15,000 subscribers. If you want to help us towards that goal, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But Darius, there's a lot to go over today. We've obviously been talking on this channel a lot about Scott Laughton, a lot about these different players. But the one guy we're going to focus on today is Brayden Shen. A new report has dropped revealing some surprising information surrounding any team that is going after his services, and specifically the Toronto Maple Leafs. You can see this here from Elliotte Friedman. The price on Brayden Shen ahead of the deadline has been set by the Blues as very, very high. So for a lot of you out there who were hoping that Brayden Shen is going to be a Leaf, it is still very possible. However, it seems like the price for every single available, whether it be third line center, winger, no matter who you're talking about, is at least a first-round pick, is extremely high. Fraser Minton has been thrown around in a bunch of talks here. This is a very interesting situation. You can see this here. There are teams with interest in Brayden Shen. It would be an excellent move for the Blues if they somehow trade him with a complete contract. Brayden Shen is one of the worst contracts in the NHL, and he's signed for 3 more seasons after this one. So there's a couple of different avenues to go about this here. But according to Elliotte Friedman, his his price is set as extremely high, which is a common theme here among pending players who are ready to be traded.
I think the thing with the Leafs is, on a lot of other teams, Brayden Shen would be the second line center. Like if the Winnipeg Jets went out and traded for Brayden Shen, he would be their second line center. On the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm not so sure that would make sense for them, or he would be, right? He'd probably be a third line center. Now, that being said, if you look at Scott Laughton, I can, to a degree, understand why they're asking for like a first round pick or a prospect of equal value, because he has term, and obviously, and Brayden Shen does too, but we'll get to that in a second. But he has term. He's a guy who can play both sides of the puck. He can chip in for goals here and there. And he only makes $3 million, right? He's 30 years old and he only makes $3 million. So you can re-sign him easily after next season, and you have him for next season. So that makes sense. Brayden Shen doesn't make any sense in that regard, right? Like, how is the price so high? He makes $6.5 million. We're going to get into his advanced analytics too, but like, he doesn't really add value to your team for $6.5 million. So they would have to retain salary. It doesn't look like St. Louis wants to do that. The price is very, very high. So to me, it sounds like St. Louis wants to hang on to their captain. That's what it sounds like at this point. And I'm not sure it made any sense at any point when Brayden Shen's name came up to me for the Leafs to trade for that player specifically. It doesn't make too much sense because I don't think he's bumping Tavares down, and you're going to have Brayden Shen as your third line center. It might, push you over the hump. It might get you over that hump in the playoffs, but not for that cap hit. And I don't think St. Louis wants to retain much of it, if any of it at all. So I think there's a lot of very interesting moving parts here, but I don't get it from St. Louis's side there.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very good player, and I think for the Leafs, there's probably nobody out there available or even debatably like remotely available that is going to replace John Tavares given the season he's had on the second line there as a center. As you look at some of his stats, he is 33 years old. I mean, his advanced analytics aren't great this season. He's put up 29 points in 53 games, and he hasn't been very good this year, and that's why this guy, this was why Rono, the analyst, said that he is one of the worst contracts in the NHL. And Rono analyst has a point here, because you're at the point now where it's like, are you willing to, again, he is 33. If this pushes them over the top and Brad Treliving thinks that this is going to push them over the top, maybe they pull the trigger and offer whatever it is. You can see the cap it there, 6.5 over $4 million. And this isn't a this isn't like an old contract at the tail end of it. This is a fairly new one. He signed until 2028. So yes, in the sense of, he'd be under contract for the next 2 to 3 years during that big window, but that cap hit is extremely interesting. You see this here. What am I missing with Brayden Shen? He's 33 with 3 more years after this one at pace for 40 points. Why do we want him? So let us know down below as well. Are you on the side of wanting Brayden Shen or not wanting him? Because at this point, I understand some of the thought behind it, though. I mean, you're going to get a guy who can play third line center. He'd be one of the better third line centers, assuming he has some sort of bounce back in the NHL. But at that cap hit, unless there's some retained salary, which I can't imagine the Blues are going to do, they'd probably rather, keep him on what, is their first line in St. Louis. It's there is a little bit of intrigue there if it could push them over the top, especially come playoff time.
This would be a no-brainer move to me if he was making like $2 or $3 million. Like, I feel like every team would be in on this guy, because then you could just play him on the third line and everything would be fine. But something, as we look towards what the Leafs are actually going to do, there's a lot of talk of adding a second line center, maybe Dylan Cousins. A lot of people don't think that Dylan Cousins would move John Tavares down, right? I think that would be a move for the future and this year as well. I think Dylan Cousins playing on a better team would actually play better, but I think that would be more of a move to ensure that the future next like 5 years is okay and not completely in the toilet. But if you trade for a guy like Brayden Shen, it might be because he's old, like he's the same age as John Tavares essentially, and the contract is horrible. The contract is horrible for what it's signed at and for what the salary cap is going to be. You still have to sign Matthew Nyes. You have to sign John Tavares. You have to sign Mitch Marner, who's going to get a significant raise now by all accounts because of the salary cap going up. So these are, you have to, you can't lose complete sight of the next couple of years, right? I do think the window is 2 to 3 years, but you can't lose complete sight of that. So again, this is a guy I think would be a no-brainer at $2 or $3 million, would push them over the top as a third line center, but I think there's better, more cost-effective options that wouldn't completely destroy the next like 3 to 5 years for the Leafs out there right now.
It'll be interesting to see if they're willing to retain any. Also, some other updates as well here. You can see this from, of course, a bunch of different people, including JT Bourne and Kipper. You need to get a guy that can potentially push John Tavares out of that second spot, a high-end move. Scott Laughton's not high enough for me. So, kind of circling back to the talk surrounding Scott Laughton, obviously, I don't know if there's any players available out there who would directly push John Tavares out. Now, I think that not a lot of people are talking about here, can John Tavares keep this pace up for the rest of the season? That's going to be the big question, and into the playoffs. Of course, he's getting up there in age. If he can continue that almost point a game, above point a game production, then they'll be in a very good spot. But if they want to get somebody who they think can at least maybe play third line center, but be ready to take over that second line spot if things start. I mean, we've seen Craig Brewer's not afraid to move at least the second, third, and fourth lines around. He started to move the first line around as well prior to the Four Nations Cup break here. And I ask you now, I know you're a big fan of Scott Laughton. Do you think Scott Laughton is enough if they were to just get Scott Laughton and say some other depth defenseman? I don't know if that's enough, and I'm curious. Let us know down below in the comments as well. But I don't know if there's many guys available who can push John Tavares necessarily out of that spot. And you can see this here. How on earth are Brayden Shen and Dylan Cousins pushing Tavares at 3C? Have we had our eyes closed all year? I think Cousins has a better chance than Brayden Shen at this point, just given his age and his upside. But it's going to be tough unless it is Dylan Cousins to find someone who at least for the foreseeable future can push John Tavares out.
I think they need a third line center like this year. If you're just looking at this year in a vacuum, next year, right? This cup window, right? And we're not talking about acquiring Dylan Cousins to make sure that the future's okay and you fill in that gap at second line center, right? They need to acquire a third line center and they need a depth defenseman. So yes, I do think Scott Laughton would be enough, but the asking price is a little crazy. So we'll see what goes down with that. But again, they have a window, they have needs. So I understand why these teams are going to be asking for stuff like that. But I think that it would be enough. Yes. And I think that John Tavares, to get back to, something you said a few minutes ago, I think that he can keep this pace up. Since the captaincy was given to Matthews, he's been playing amazing. Maybe it's like, a release of pressure. Maybe he doesn't have as many, responsibilities or anything on his shoulder in that way. It could just be a mental thing. Obviously, not much has changed for him in terms of his role with the team, but it could just be a mental thing. He looks more free this year. He's putting up crazy points, and he's always really been there for the team in the playoffs too. He sent them to the second round for the first time in 19 years. He had a couple big goals and points in last year's playoffs against the Bruins too. So I think he's always kind of been there too. I can remember, tons of moments for John Tavares in the playoffs. So, I think that he will be able to keep this up. It's just the future, right? When you're looking towards the future, the next like 3 years, he's not going to be able to keep this up. He won't be able to be your second line center. But for this year, I think it's okay. And I think Scott Laughton might be okay. And then maybe you rejig things in the summer when there's more salary cap and you kind of have an idea of, Nyes is going to make this, Marner might make this, or maybe won't resign, right? So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, one quick note from Elliot Freeman again, surrounding Brayden Shen. He links Vegas as well as, a couple of other teams in there, but Vegas is the big one, although he's not sure Vegas has what St. Louis wants, which is, whether it be a first-round pick, whether it be assets, if they're not retaining, it's going to be interesting to see ultimately what they decide to do. But let us know down below what your thoughts are, not only on this report from Elliot Freeman, but surrounding Scott Laughton. Do you think that would be enough? Let us know down below. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.